that if it's more convenient.
See how far this goes.
Contention 1 is the illegal alien. Definition detention relies on restricting legal representation for immigrants. This representation crisis sustains an endless cycle of structural violence, deportation, abusive discrimination against illegal aliens. Harem and levity regulation approximately fund legal services representing immigrants repeal services discussing immigrant legal aid appears. W self-legal aid representing the moment before way for detention is powerless minorities have their grievances heard. Immigrant legal aid is a crisis poor. Immigrants suffer from devastating legal problems, eviction, fraud, discrimination, domestic abuse, but also deportation, making them sometimes powerless to appeal for protection against exploitation, abuse. Federal service to handle limited immigration work laws has gone far more complicated, difficult to unravel without the help of a lawyer. An indefinite detention not sentenced under the war on terror must be understood as racialized, larger war on the criminal or illegal alien. Her name Deza, and in the government's construction of the war on terror deportation is part of larger history of practice that criminalizes non-white immigrants' legal institutional change resulting from the war on terror scope that reaches all non-citizens. Commission of immigration detention in the context of national security should be understood. Within non-citizen detention, immigrant detention was also marginalized by the immigration debate, whereas widespread knowledge of U.S. detention practice even to begin on 9/11. The stigma of criminal foreignness and illegality or offensive immigration policy equated for generational Latino states also become fixed to Latino immigrants through their criminalization as illegals by the detention process. A war on terror contributed to the racial discrimination against non-citizens was widely used to apprehend Arabs, Muslims, South Asians with detrimental effects on Latinos and African American communities. Plus, on level discourse of that national security cross for the laws of existing anti-immigrant sentiment. Latinos have represented the prototypical example of overwhelming majority fighting war against terrorism and hate fighting. Immigrants, the legal status embedded in detention history serve as a critical prologue to understanding contemporary definition that is the merger of criminal immigration law, domestic war, and terror used to advance a war on immigrants, and the result is detention, deportation of illegal aliens. Is a racial and gender system eliminating the Latino threat to national security goal, Esposa in 13. Current targeting meant for deportation symbols rupture of previous restriction is to immigration regime policies that focus on excluding women from reproduction, including men for labor production, institutionalized criminalization, and surveillance of men of color, hidden in the post-9/11 climate of Islamophobia, joblessness, detention, and deportation targeted Latin American immigrant men to HSS for discourse of national security, mass deportation versus the primary structure for recognition from gender and racial threats of criminal aliens and terrorist commingling of national security. Immigration policy produced unprecedented deportation become gender and racial removal of the rise in deportation stems from decision to expand immigration law enforcement as part of the broader project of war on terror. Several impacts versus deportation creates incalculable physical, psychological violence that must be rejected alone. Again, 7 is tragic. Domestic deportation can destroy all that makes life worth living. When people are deported, they're forcibly separated from domestic children and parents. They are torn away from their homes. Families seek to their families have produced poverty, rendered homeless, forced to seek public assistance. Traumatic experience affect them thought process, learning about produce self-perception, individual feeling about self and other children exhibit signs of depression and aggression or withdrawal. Some exhibit signs of sleep disturbance, hoarding food, excessive eating, self-stimulation, rocking, or fail to thrive. 7% response showed symptoms post-traumatic stress disorder. Second, detention subjugates detainees to unlivable conditions, resulting in self-deportation. The lack of representation is critical. Miko 9. Many immigrants give up the rights to deportation hearings simply to get out of detention length negatively affects detainees' physical and mental health, resulting through release of proper legal representation, loss of dignity, or loss of life. There are also the disturbing and physical and emotional and loss of life. 83 deaths in the past 5 years. 30 preventable abuse of treatment has a serious damaging effect on the physical and mental health of detainees. 2 compounding trauma detention can be particularly traumatizing. Immigrants have a higher suicide risk, 7% suffer from anxiety, and over half suffer from PTSD. Detention works as distance after discuss a report issues because they fear being deported. The possibility of death in detention further aggravate these fears is disintegrated quality for immigrants and mandatory detention encourages detainees self-report and lasting unlocking systems warfare culminates in endless structural violence and warfare. Smith and 9. White supremacy is constituted by separatists, stigma, aid of religion, logic, slavery, capitalism, blackness becomes equated with slaveability, forms of slavery may change, but the logic of self-respect consistent. Second is genocide through this. Non-native people become rightful inheritors of all that was indigenous land, resources, indigenous spirituality, or culture. Genocide serves as the anchor for colonialism. Third is Orientalism, the process of Western finding self as a superior civilization. Orientalism marks peoples as posing a constant threat. Orientalism allows the United States to justify being in the constant state of war, survival structures and resistance. White supremacy itself, our alliance will not be solely based on the shared victimization, but where we are complicit in the victimization of others. These approaches might help us to develop a resistance strategy that do not inadvertently keep the system in place. We check our aspiration to ensure liberation does not become the model of oppression for others. Like white binary is central. However, this is not the only binary. There's also indigenous settler binary, also Orientalist logic and other failures. Geocentrism. We fail to see how the United States maintains a system of oppression. Heteropatriarchy is the building block of U.S. empire, just as patriarchs rule the family, the leads of a nation-state, rule their citizens. Any liberation struggle that does not challenge heteronormativity cannot challenge colonialism or white supremacy. Contention 2 is non-citizen agonism. Debates surrounding illegal aliens only take place within a media spectacle that commodifies the immigrant and other Chavez. Innate community membership is imagined because regardless of inequality and exploitation, the nation is always conceived as of imagined communities, public sphere, less in circulation of commodities through representation, both inclusion and exclusion. In debates over immigration reform by the effects we went to the media's representation of immigrant spectacles. Media spectacles objectify Latinos. People are dehumanized. It is easier to lack empathy and past policies than laws that govern their behavior rather than human beings that help construct those aconsiderable legitimate members of society. Those less legitimate marginalized and stigmatized other by defining alien, foreigner, and immigrant. A violent exclusion of others from our our moral community necessitates endless global warfare. In 7, sovereignty, intolerant of internal differences was a vision of existential identity set off against existential others who were the source of threat and alienation in a definitive way of limiting political communities and linked to the inevitability and perpetuation of wars and existential condition. War can be a rational way of resolving political conflicts. The existence of the other constitutes an unacceptable threat to faces. Responsibility from our policy and political discourse. We ignore complex history by portraying conflict as existential. We must embrace a form of agonistic pluralism that creates institutional spaces to contest hegemonic ideologies of non-citizens. Governors in 11. Exploiting existing understandings of who counts within democracy and launching our conception of who's qualified to make claims about the larger democratic community. There's a gap between law and the society which that legal apparatus attempts to administrate the administrative realm of law must evolve to enlarge our notion of who ought to make democratic domains beyond traditional citizenship, agnostic spaces for non-citizen. Political voices could be achieved by constructing venues for consultation alongside existing political institutions for debate, discussion, and exchange, suggesting the necessity of agnostic theory of democratic education. That includes larger institutional frameworks to address hegemonic abuses of power and quantum. In 8, the liberal democracies concept as sedimentary forms of power relations, resulting in on top of contingent hegemonic intervention, not recognized due to the absence of counter-hegemonic projects, radical democratic aesthetic, sometimes hybridization of the tradition, the identities they co-produce. Hybridity means that radical democratic aesthetic practices and anti-essentialist identity politics problematize race, sex, and gender interfaces, and intersectional analysis of such identity categories that place in multiple discursive forms on relatively equal footing. The intersectional rhetoric places discursive forms on equal footing, working in tandem. That one is not disciplining another. And this intersectional racial analysis is imperative in understanding and testing other forms of institutional oppression. Hernandez in 8. The detention of non-citizens has entrapped a variety of racialized groups. Comparative racial analysis better refutes the systematic arrangement of institutionalized racism and detention policy with heterogeneous background and continues to have complex effects history, immigrant detention, loss of structural inequality, fall on non-citizens. The U.S. is defined that we come to know. Latino detainees alongside similarly positioned persons together have created legal prerequisites to diminish legal avenues for relief and generated the construction and escalation of the detention infrastructure of larger scale of its impact extends to the creation of severe legal inequalities for all non-citizens less challenged. Legislators will suffer disproportionately from the government's domestic war on terror as legislative mandates limit protections for relief for detainees to advance on due process against citizens detainees by depriving them of their due procedural rights and pluralism. Alone is critical to addressing numerous global issues threatening human survival when men and through radical pluralism is predicated upon a broad conception of political, the unacceptably narrow conception of politics, the exclusion of something from political gesture, power, excellence include continuing to threat of terrorism and disease and global warming, environmental destruction. The narrow conception of politics can only account for in part for these events. Why this is this increasing complexity brings is the pervasiveness of politics, inseparability of politics from ethical concerns to enable political theorists to navigate these events and infinitely plural possibilities will shape politics. The contention theory is the plan. The United States federal government should restrict the executive's war power authority to deny federal legal counsel to immigrants indefinitely detained under suspicion of terrorism. This provides a necessary and sufficient mechanism to contest and restrict the executive detention authority. Hurry and level representation for indigent immigrants comes from a patchwork of resources to handle immigration law problems, but generally do not address the legal problems. Federally funded legal services are well suited to provide a holistic service to immigrants, but shy away because of restrictions. 100% of providers respond to the responding need for immigrant legal aid. If the restrictions were lifted, it would result in considerable infusion of resources for the immigrant legal aid for legal problems like deportation. Immigration law has only grown more draconian and difficult without the help of the growth of immigration detention has created special problems for immigrants. Restrictions prevent any providers who take federal money from representing many immigrants. They discriminate among immigrants classified as permanent or potentially permanent over impermanent aliens. The plan challenges definite detention. Legal representation is the most important restriction against concrete abuses current, and 5 most immigrants will ever face remove likely legal representation, although criminal defendants and injury. The right to appoint a counsel. Immigrants do not think they can be represented by counsel, but I know especially the government funding a counsel apart. Removal cases have uniformly refused to appoint a counsel chair pro bono. Legal parties cannot afford to serve all immigrants and detainees face particular hurdles. Legal representation can increase without significant federal funding, including changes in federal law removal. Proceedings that seem inappropriate area for government appointed lawyers. Lawyers.
Stop, bro. 1 penny. Right. Plan text says war powers authority. If Obama does not have that authority under the war power, do you still get rid of it?
If Obama does not have
War powers authority is different than immigration authority. After the Kiemba case, we got rid of the war power authority, and Obama decided to use immigration authority to continue to detain people. Do you get rid of the ability to detain under the Kiemba ruling on immigration?
piece of evidence saying that we are a war power authority.
That's not the question. Do you overrule that Kiemba decision and say that Obama no longer has the immigration
would
authority?
allow for providing legal counsel to immigrants indefinitely detained.
That's not the question.
The precedent you're describing doesn't really matter.
Why?
Because the Attorney General has been using immigration power to detain detainees in the War on Terror for over.
They've also been used to detain those not in the war on terror.
Right.
Which is why this is not.
They still do that.
That's fine. So you don't get rid of the ability to detain outside of the war on terror.
Our argument is that like all immigrants can
Just the war on
fit
terror. Awesome.
our
Do you have a
songs
part
that
that you think
fit
says anything about war powers authority, considering the term of art is 0 places in your 1AC besides the plain text?
No, it says War on Terror, which we believe is the zone of hostility which
Okay.
the war power authority is being exercised.
First advantage, if we are still able to have others who we can detain, just not based on the war on terror, and we can still say that we think that we don't like immigrants for other reasons, how do you resolve every single issue with immigration authorization?
Our argument is that like the war on terror is steeped in like
I understand that. The war on terror is based in whiteness ideology. You get rid of the war on terror, not whiteness ideology. How do you resolve the issue that you pointed
our
out?
argument is that like we have a specific instance in which we should engage in intersectional analysis about why these things come to happen.
Okay, I guess if your terminal impacts are all in the context of larger issues that we don't address together, how do you resolve any of your impact claims?
I believe I'm pretty sure sorry, I'm trying to get the exact author. Our Smith evidence says at one point that we have to focus on shared victimization, like in the context of immigration,
Okay.
and that this would ultimately create effective resistance strategies to challenge the system as a whole.
So any action that can question this form of indefinite detention can question the system writ large? I'm just trying to clarify my question.
Can you rephrase that question?
Getting rid of this form of indefinite detention gets rid of all things that are messed up with the larger system writ large. That is your claim.
Our argument is that we can challenge. Yes, we challenge.
Yes,
the
challenging
system.
any one form is sufficient to challenge every form.
I mean, not necessarily. I think all of our evidence in the 1AC is specific to immigration.
I agree, it's
Essentially
specific
all
to immigration. Your plan, where is the court that you think says the plan solves every instance of immigration? Actually, it's fine. Burke evidence says U.S. imperialism is bad. How do you end like troops in North or South
Our Berg
Korea?
evidence says that like when we alienate a specific population,
Yeah,
that is what
troops in
creates a
South
condition
Korea.
for war.
How do you get rid of troops in South Korea?
I have no idea.
So they're
how that's
stationed there to
potentially
kill
relevant.
North Korea because they are an other who we think is irrational
I have
and needs
no
to die.
I have no
How do
idea
you solve
what's
uniqueness?
I have no idea what Alan Washington is.
Okay, that was 3 minutes. We'll take prep. What?
Oh, then I gotta speak to this one.
Wait, I emailed you. Sorry, there's something else that we should ask you.
leaves us with 740.
Ah.
My bad. He's just attaching a file. Sorry. That's also flippers. Sorry, my computer's... I think it's 5 off. Yep. Solvency and then contention, I guess. Everyone good?
Detainees is a euphemism which hides a torture prisoner. Proverbs 13. The barely usage refers to men how they Guantanamo as detainees. I consider for them as prisoners. All detained or prisoner may be roughly synonymous. The term detainee strikes me as euphemism. They're until delayed. They were arrested under guilty guard. They are tortured. Use violated Article 2 of the ICCPR. Prisoners have been being deprived of food, water, torture, but for periods exceeding a year and rape. Hence, I employ the term prisoner. Second, vote night by insulating people from understand the situation full meaning. They become detached. They mention 3. They almost together the terminology is necessary, including the invention of euphemisms. Euphemistic labels are everyday device for masking, sanitizing, conferring, respectively, like using palliative terms at 9. Quality words insulate. They're used in listener for experiencing fully the meaning clinically attached from their context. Expressions 5 as a role of human something of which mentoring laws from. Next off is the other critique. The FCC's indefinite detention has a place at Lexall. This necessarily calls on the normal laws to be universally applied. This ignores how the normal law treats all prisoners, immigrants, and upholds suffering. Vote negative to challenge normalization of law or alternative ends to indefinite detention by fighting against the law, not within the law. Chance 5. Does Guantanamo embody law absent or a black hole implicit in legal writing is a sense that represents an exceptional phenomenon that might be overcome by law? The plight of detainees listed alcohol law suspension and of legal authorities to detain the detention council of Guantanamo is placed in the law operating except Guantanamo may be more closely read as a jurisdictional outcome of exhaustive attempts to demonstrate the political legal regime of Guantanamo Bay and traffication merit resistance in court from the entitlement of Guantanamo detainees the opportunity to test their detention for neutral decision making the DOD and regulations far from lawfulness. One finds Guantanamo space filled the notion of demand which always withdrawn is definitive diagnosis of Guantanamo problem cast as intolerable scholarly characteristic of Guantanamo rely on the archetype of the exception taking a separation from the normalcy the account with phenomena is understood to necessitate law discloses the hyper-regulatory abundance laws and rules so if any sort of proliferate Guantanamo why this means that fundamental violence is being affected. What is this if not a call for compliance? What is this if not an affirmation of the norm report of Guantanamo so of critical energy the considerable effect of the scope of false on less than 600 persons being abused in Cuba rather than on the millions subjected to endemic sexual, physical, and substance abuse. Prisons around the democratic world attempts to capture a violation of its rights of asylum seekers rather than immigrants' constitutional norm to invoke to frame a decision. The indefinite detention of Guantanamo might be found through not through a return to the norm but through an insistence on the preference of the exception. These terms like one question who decides to require the concrete case of law cannot factually determine the potential of the exception to the union in order of rationalist scheme held open northward the side of the exception already known to be monopolies except for no longer by the power of real life break through the cross of a mechanism that has been scorpied by repetition. That is a process of acceptance of the norm. This office scope for and reference norm report of Guantanamo Bay by understanding Guantanamo Bay as a legal word to annihilation. We come to appreciate the scope of the legal action within such a jurisdiction. So, next off, topicality. Authority over indefinite detention is the authority to detain enemy combatants. Glacier 6. Endorsed by Congress, the defense of treating terrorists are not only fundamental or cause authority to detain enemy personnel for the duration of hostilities. And restriction is a prohibition on action. The act must restrict indefinite detention, not legal counsel. North Amendment 11. The term restriction shall mean prohibit regulation. No such as activity to be authorized by a permanent license. And the act restricts immigration authorities for exclusive power of the executive or put back on presumption because the executive official rely on immigration authority chopped up the can of the court that does not have the authority to order the petitioner release to the U.S. court determine that such release would violate the usual distribution of immigration authority. The court of the government concluded that the court has a matter for press release plus the executive determined that release of team is being held unlawfully made may remain indefinitely detained in the DC Circuit Court to determine whether violated various laws unknowing the executive ability to administer those laws. Vote next. 1. Limit does not have authority of the president to expose something to talk about anything related to the 4 topic areas which makes research impossible. 2. Ballot courts have no authority to essentially release prisoners is necessary to for negative ground ballot prevention and intervention with 3 extra top killers and independent voting issue. Artificial inflates out ground force to be counterplans to go back to square 1. Next off, politics. Immigration will pass banner will allow vote belongs leadership Steve Huffington Post 1026 demonstrating sign on expect more. Come on board amid hope from leaders both sides to deal with academic issues including progress in the president show real leadership in economies who have to bring it to the 4-4. Activists are hopeful and the plan kills Obama's jet at higher 10. Congressional opposition influences presidential cost benefit calculations. Measuring the cost of congressional opposition is trackable. 2 pathways could raise the political cost by profile of congressional challenges affecting ability to city public including popular pressure bear oppositing development to spend considerable political capital in the military beginning to the detriment of other major items on its programmatic agenda. And immigration reform expands skilled labor, social relations, and growth in China and India. LA Times 11-9. 12. CAR will see expansion of skilled labor visas, particularly law specifically at least a 5-fold increase in highly skilled labor visas that would provide significant shock now for India and China. There's widespread consensus among content and academics going against crossing creating business relationships between countries India and China with the office of business policy and engage opportunities of bigger plus. And U.S. Indian relations versus South Asian people war shaper 2. Washington can benefit because of cooperation the benefits from the position from which all compulsory between China and the green handshake or benefit both countries pre-reference to U.S. relations in India. And China class housing nuclear weapons C7. And economic crisis in China and Syria still given how big complicated China wants to convert session leader, military crisis selected full escalation side. Next off, the OLC counterplan. The Office of Legal Counsel should determine the executive branch lacks the legal authority to deny federal legal counsel to immigrants indefinitely detained under suspicion of terrorism. The President should require the Office of Legal Counsel to publish any legal opinion writing policies adopted by the executive branch. The executive branch should abide by all policies recommended by the Office of Legal Counsel. The counterplan is competitive and solves the case. OLC rules should not actually remove authority, but nonetheless hold binding precedential value on the executive branch intent. But a permanent is to be given to the credible source referring legality of actions. OLC's policies tell me incredibly. OLC requires the individual writing from general counsel to the requesting agency to request be specific and agency by its own views. Requirements contain the requesting agency. OLC's legal advice is binding with the executive until withdrawn by long-standing tradition. The advice of finding OLC refused to advise if there is doubt about whether the requesting agency will follow this card gives. Advice shall be made is willing to abide only by advice like the fact is issuing OLC's advice binding interest not ignored because OLC's executive legal advice and agency's decision not to seek OLC's advice with skepticism continues to be perfectly unheard of. For the White House reverts OLC's legal analysis. OLC's reputation for writing canon legal advice based on best you make reverse all unlikely. Case. There's no evidence CF does anything. They don't have any evidence that immigrants are indefinitely detained. And second, wartime will force Obama to resist the plan that attractive battle creates a national diversion and impairs military wartime decisions global aid. Congressional restrictions put in one of the president wartime restrictions. President would argue the requirements that make sense of the war and terror wartime reality. Favor the president will harm president car legislative and economic state for particular authority judiciary and likely to resolve dispute. This leads benefits to engage in dispute or constitutionality in the testing nation for source contains the rule of law chaos and still being resolved between constitutional positions one by the day compromise between benches is essential wartime social science research that self-serving vice harms use position loss and dispute to drag on. That creates an anti-war coalition that destroys your scratch that. Contention 1. Consequences before ethical justifications. The alternative is politically responsibility. IC2. The purity of intent is not sure if you know what intent and or reveal by more purity, simplicity, and injustice. Politics about unintended consequences, effects rather than motives that is significant conflict to good generate evil. And the extinction always gave with fair evaluation go 9-4. Whether from the ontological obligation of utilitarian particular writing and GCP supposes only because my sometimes I care about such things as morality, whether this is fun on the property outweighing threat, when a being that becomes assumed sought to defend it is beyond human for appeal or persuasion. And structural violence is an obscure metaphor used cannot lead to positive change because conflates distinct problems of poverty and violence. Building 77. Structural violence causes peace for metaphors for that reason are self-like metaphors that poverty is like being able to fake those countries and metaphor there's not very much violence. It's very different phenomenon from poverty to positive which creates poverty not all like the positive which creates sustained violence of normal poverty cultural violence is only normal cultural violence or poverty versus violence poverty and six everybody's not a bit of complex poverty I mean metaphor structural violence structural violence many times considered finding the answer. I might need more stuff. No impact on democracy and economic liberalization. Checks the effects of state power. King 97. Modern bureaucracy is not capable of genocidal action. Its state coercion has no move to terror. As Germany has solid shown policies of genocidal movements away from modernity. Modern society is democratic. And also economic flows and worth of free control. The part where independent firms gives companies to seek control and enterprise. These common attributes of modernity stand plate modern genocide. Group identification is an evolution throughout most of human history. Shown along 87. If this business consideration combined to influence human Hispanic and groups and related individuals, simple sharing and related individuals or trade with these responses to cultural shapes also here 99% of humans' existence and income favoritism and level of at all nine. The building blocks of social political rights are not individual class but contribute to being jobs right and aggregate environments individuals necessary and different outside entity. Fear plays a crucial role because physical security is superior for the pursuit of any level fear of enemy self-belief overcoming like various evolution by ultimate social psychology fight into sport. And this means the links in our work from first causal. Giving legal counsel to immigrants won't affect broader political movements or identity construction. The social process of adaptation is too complicated to be politically manipulated to conquer time. Identities are never settled. The interrelation between national and internal external one of the reasons why natural formation are not easily subject to rational manipulation. Cross-cutting developments and rights will be people power of natural identities, the ability to arouse emotion, power, emotion, mind, focus, solidarity, rights, and laws of budget, substantive differences making pervasive without natural identity for focusing on the control of rational actors. Also, there's no spillover. The EF doesn't change pluralistic policies in areas like global warming, etc., which means you don't have an internal link to existentialist. Also, that immigration Immigration turns the case because immigration is a signal of openness to immigrants, which solves the internal link to racist motivations that 1C points out.
I'll jump these two in a second.
They read evidence that says they end U.S. imperialism.
Transition from U.S. dominance causes common perception of weakness and fear spread for favor of 11. U.S. internal occupied but increasingly intense struggle for power is driven by the shifting structure of the international system. Potential conflicts, particularly fought ascendant states, typically feel compelled to change territorial boundaries, international institutions, fire, like penetrating the point by divisions, sites, resolve peacefully. Some have been resolved peacefully. Others attempt to peace with challenges. These efforts almost always end in failure. Periods of transition to U.S. empire can overtake the common state of itself from after war. And
No, I want you to read the client first.
we will always pursue hegemony, Mayor Shrine 11. Washington has always had a choice compared to one offense isolationism. There's no chance Washington would adopt this policy. These principles will make sure other countries dominance. The U.S. protect other instead pursuing dominance countries can feel on the score. And these will act like the hegemony can exercise to create Arab 411. 411, 12. In Asia, he still stays for unilateral security strategy and hard power. He's trying to transform APEC into U.S. dominant organization. Trade existing military partnerships. The U.S. can contain great parts of mounting hegemony. Germany is beating with use refuses to accept this reality. Nobody can agree for what kind of world order the others will emerge. Intervention and updating 11.
It's fine.
No.
I'll send you those three cards.
What's the status of all the advocacies?
Conditional.
Conditional. Can the plan ever happen in the world by their advocacy? How do we do? K arguments?
One of them is just your representations are bad, you should lose. You've made an argument there prior to
So first
Right,
off,
so can you endorse the plan?
It's not
We
an
think the
advocacy.
framework question of that off-case position should not be one if the plan is a good idea or not. It should be one of if the way you presented it is good or not.
And no for the other one?
Not through state action. I think the purpose of it is the way that you've gone about
Okay,
resolving
sure.
the issue is bad.
We'll get back
Obviously,
to that.
we can resolve the issue.
On topicality, your first interpretation evidence says that detain enemy personnel. Do you read a definition of what enemy personnel is?
No,
Okay,
it's
so
a
what can be
definition of
determined as
authority.
enemy personnel?
Well, enemy personnel is a legal term of art, so yes, immigrants are potentially enemy personnel, but they are not detained as such, which means they don't fall under the Obama's.
Sure. I guess that begs the question of your Chow evidence. Your Chow evidence says that the executive cannot detain immigrants because it violates immigration law, and that the D.C. Court of Appeals already ruled on that. If that was the case, why are immigrants still detained, and under what authority are those immigrants still detained?
No, our evidence says they cannot be released because that violates immigration law, not that they cannot be detained. Obama lost the battle on the war powers component, which means he is relying on immigration authority, which the act cannot possibly affect without being on top of it.
Okay, sure. On the K, your like one card K. How does fighting against the law lead to representation for people that are detained?
How does fighting for the law lead to representation of people that are indefinitely detained? Our argument is simply that this is a better political strategy than meeting.
Yeah, how does that political strategy give immigrants a voice?
It is one that's based on their voice, not the federal government commodifying them, saying what they should do as a bargaining chip for the larger
Okay,
war
how
on
does
terror and
that
detention.
change the way the United States federal government relates to them?
Well, we would say the way the United States federal government relates to individuals is based on individuals because the United States federal government is made up of a bunch of individuals.
Our argument will be one that our approach should be political rather than legalistic. So we could use political pressure to change the USFG. We shouldn't do that through legal norms and legal
Sure.
standards.
On the politics dissent, your uniqueness evidence just cites a senator named Denham. I don't really know him. Why is he qualified to say whether or not immigration will or
that's-
won't pass? He just says we should put it on the floor. I think people would get on board. Where
That's
do you think
the
your evidence
first line of
actually
the
makes
uniqueness
it?
card, but the next part actually says there is broader optimism on both sides of the aisle and increasing momentum for
Where's
bipartisan
that
cooperation.
highlighted in red?
I expect more to come on board amid hope from leaders on both sides that a deal can come. Denham said issues impede progress. We need the president to show real leadership. Also, Denham's qualified because he's an insider in immigration negotiations, which is the only source for uniqueness cards on either side.
circumvention argument.
I thought you scratched that.
Scratch the second part.
The second part. Okay. Well, I put that at the top of the illegal alien page.
Okay.
So it's T, the like illegal aliens, like the case stuff.
Case stuff was with solvency at the top.
Okay.
Okay.
Pluralism.
Pluralism. OLC. CIR. This is law K. And this is deterrence. Work K. Sorry, I do jump around a lot in the document, and I apologize for that ahead of time. But everything is bolded with the headers, so it shouldn't be too hard to follow. Alright. Anyone alright?
We meet the plaintiff specifies authority to detain immigrants suspected under the War on Terror. Immigration detention is used intentionally to expand the detention under the War on Terror without legal challenge. Value 9. When criminal justice system required to be undone with the immigration system requires a lower standard of broad description to detain expanding detention requires using immigration rather than the criminal justice system automatically places detention outside the judicial review and within administration discretion. Immigration detention is now used to supplement the criminal justice system. Most of the 9-level detention would have ended within 48 hours after been under criminal law. The justice system is misused. Immigration laws to create de facto preventative detention system. The principal consequence has been authority to detain individuals without affording a meaningful opportunity to challenge their detention, and immigration detention is a subset of war powers authority. DHS no date responsible to the federal government for immigration. The nation's immigration is vitally and integrally woven with the conduct of foreign relations and the war power. The primary means by the federal government express the idea that the very responsible for the president, including investigation, arrest, detention, removal proceedings directed by the aliens implementing immigration policies, and assisting the attorney general in counter-interpretation restriction means to eliminate includes legal representation. Practice 10. When we suppose the president must have legal representation, where his course we must only discover past such power means also character of administration which have power against the war powers from necessity of survival of the nation, survival of the president must also actually temporary basis, and this includes a limit on congressional assistance. More than 11 financial deference to statutory restrictions that are transferred to national power. The earliest is the Collective Act, which includes monetary protection, including judicial approval by statute management, compliance with statutory choice use of force, FTIs, to help the youth kind to give world to still the Congress passes search of access to the statutory without non-resistance, and funding cuts are restrictions. Haynes 11. Congress 16 is part of military engagement restrictions. The president with serious discretion will absolutely defining restrictions. Have been so getting congressional power over spending the to check on the president's war powers, control the power of the conduct of war, and war power authority means preparation for conflict. It makes the nation role of the military the fundamental of armed forces to fight the threat to fight wars, and actually makes it committed the part of fundamental function of the armed forces to break up hostility based on the war powers of the president. This includes broader security measures. Prefer our interpretation. Prefer interpretation of the entire season impact on the limits of precision arguments. The reference relies on a false legal distinction between criminal and terrorist detainees. Impact is violent forms of education and flawed policy making, and increases background generic detention absolute duties active self-restraint counterbalance, and have no unique literature to innovate this. Always Negron increases Negron 2. Terrorist said debates get old and die fast. Immigration allows for multiple econ and capital flight protection system. Dissets and border security detention visa status counterbalance, and no limits explosion against immigrant detention doesn't flow to other parts of the topic. Our interpretation predictably limits detainees of the war on terror, and default to reasonability resolution intentionally says areas under indefinite detention entirely sees couch in terms of the war powers. In the war on terror, their interpretation leads to a race above the most exclusive definition. Now, the illegal alien page. The construct of the illegal aliens use excluded tall scale population. The impact of that is an interlocking system of repression that's used for deportation and detention, which divided life of individuals and also subject them to inhuman forms of detention. The impact is multiple forms of exclusion, such as Orientalism, white supremacy, and racist gender violence. Their consequentialism arguments are relevant. We agree that that consequences are important. We just dispute the impact framework by which these impacts should be calculated, and we must be able to contest violent detention nerves and policy making, not because they're internal all their impacts, but because it's heated education all around and pedagogy in mind politics framing issue. Who is included on decision calculus, and the methodology used is more important than specific impacts. Singer 89, the assumption the analysis of employment consequences and paradigms. In fact, how we interpret the determine the consequences of given the neutral and message important we may unconsciously recreate forms of hierarchy reflection may enable us to fetch political effects. Good intention, not immunized against the illegitimate exercise of power. Good intention, not word about device. Our one goal to understand concretely where privacy logical and we access their war impacts versus institutional violence exclude makes war an existential condition that's Dr. Burkman. Second, creates incalculable structural violence from racism, sexism, homophobia, Orientalism, and imperialism. That's Smith. Third, pluralism is a better strategy for brain distinction because it incorporates multiple perspectives. Complex issues require complex thinking. Narrow-minded politics produces failed politics. The circumvention argument makes zero sense of context. Eliminates congressional, says that the executive power cannot restrict the authority to detain restrict the authority to give legal counsel, which means Congress would functionally require them to provide legal counsel to indefinite detainees, which doesn't make sense here. The extinction comes first. It doesn't make sense in the context of the affirmative. We say the question is who is included in this calculus. They say that they say that structural violence is bad. We're for building is talking about violence as a behavior. We're talking about actual detention and deportation of people sitting in ICE detention facilities, which doesn't make any sense in the context of the bullying of us now. The pluralism advantage democracy. We make democracy better. Our Glover evidence is talking. It says that radical democracy requires everyone to be included at the table before we can make democracy step to illiberal. Democracy becomes illiberal when people are excluded from this decision calculus. Evolutionary. Their evolutionary arguments, they make zero sense in the context of the affirmative. It's not a question of whether or not inside or outside groups exist. It's a question of whether or not we legitimate other perspectives, and whether or not we legitimize these inside and outside groups and allow them to all contest counter hegemonic ideas. That's a Glover and Inquine's reference. Now they say they don't solve ideology, but this evidence says that the issue was never. This issue says that it's never. Identities are never centered. Our argument is that we can have a multidimensional understanding of identity, but that we need to allow these identities to challenge counter hegemonic forces in place. And necessarily say it doesn't spill over. Our argument is not about a spillover. It's about contesting a very particular set of knowledge production and arguments that are mundane. As evidence indicates that this allows us to have an intersectional push to challenge other forms of oppression. What else is here? Oh, imperialism, good stuff. Group all of it. R. Smith evidence indicates that the author evidence assumes a form of Orientalist logic that allows for exclusion and domination of other people. Their evidence says that it produces peace, but the question is peace for who? Obviously not peace for the immigrant who's detained in the which means you should carry you should prioritize the perspective of the immigrant when doing your this form of impact act. It's not the OLC counterplay. Doesn't solve anything. Congressional restrictions on federal aid prevent the federal legal counsel from being given to immigrant detainees. That's our Hean evidence, which means that there is no solvency permutation, but permutation do the counterplan and multiple litigation options are voting issues sets forward open that I can keep the best choice option excluded is the least covered option predicted to see last inch read off the child contradictions to advocate still education response means we get to advocate a little different from new ads and the two our interpretations they get one conditional option and links to politics harsh will just cut funding hell 5 friends can answer the agenda by decree checks and lots of the president received without statutory authority the courts would stand to overturn action just as Congress cut funding even in those months of presidential election zenith the congressional progress may have asserted. Doesn't turn the affirmative indicates that the entire debate over immigration is couched within the logic of the illegal aim, which means even if they allow for comprehensive immigration, will still be couched within the same form narrative which we're critical, which means that the app is a prerequisite to solving in logic. That it says flawed detentions, human political sentence are bad, but we cannot contest them because it would be politically unpopular. This is the logic of violent exclusion turned by the entire when you see him vote no, the plan is not debating Congress, plan voting no, to still cost capital, and the unsolved link plan happens immediately bypass the debate, and saying healthcare thump the DA Wilson 1029 Obama's mentioned that's the too little about the issue that Obama friend to begins freedom of speech through congressional arm twisting. The approach with Obama's been on about the country's demonstration. Two major issues threatening to the website of healthcare for humanity. Aspiring targeting fellow world leaders. Obama said the web is less likely to the president to seem not less the process of domestic agenda. Peaceful efforts are more popular. Solves the dissent fully 1030. House most Africans won't vote for a congressional bill. The French small approach is not totally bad. Something is better than nothing. None of the time you get a bill passed from 2014 over switch on re-election. Anything political since House Republicans leaders have rejected. Congress most thing was said vote on individual process and DC nominations. Thumb comes for the dissent. Burning 1029. There's the battle room over Obama makes the best central government put to a vote such as Wednesday, the police should tell the DC group that having knowledge and know the plan doesn't get tied to Obama perceived as attacking air and negotiations in the 96 Congress, not the current Carson politics that teach bad policy making skills. Hill should at 13. How much political capital Obama this one no bearing that actually happens is also something to do with immigration in the state what little to do with Obama political capital can make the what really do an offensive change everything of political capital is notion that only thinking that can be literature qualifies that winning it was one issue also change the decision change the outcomes of the other change position again Winston Van Way in fact their position also to win his rights and the plan has massive support in 4013 most Americans are the right to detain immigrants support the lives help immigrants is high by partisan and recent both 3/4 including youth of support advice or immigrants facing deportation cards to extend the right to counsel pledges and votes all kinds of space and CRR won't pass. Wilson Tech Wayne and both the evidence for reaching the authority peaceful approach to support evidence and provide critical support except for their issue based on the most developed bias and conflict of UP feelings and most shepherds reject government support citizenship that was leaders to say one issue rank fellowship so and the lock take the perspective of the immigrant hegemonic ideals must be contested. You should evaluate the debate from the perspective of the indefinitely detained. Our argument is that the laws can be contested. The only question is whether we engage in institutions. That institutions are critical. James and Talbot 11. Those who deconstruct the habit of detention may be chiefly deterred in applying sense for the destruction of the laws, law for international recognized except for breaking detention law. You can under question how to govern detention. Don't shift philosopher alter. You want to go to absolute resentful of the law of the war. Anti-security new conventional military crime system. And for now, long system might begin partition both permutation with the all non-combatant part of the alternative laws reflexively contested. How to direct and 12 democratic legal system can achieve safety and other system that nuclear weapons condition language forming some trees can also legally find in the way and constitution can see that attempts to legal norms about between American flex today's stratification mark that card and crossed by all the floors and floats and all of its regional law is good now. The detainee argument. There's no alternative. This argument is that it's not that we use detainees, but we use it by the way that they are detained, which means that there's no unique link to this argument. And the argument is just a form of policing chambers, 13 Democrat possibly bound of police orders, policies, police make it impossible, and it's not meaning contest of democracy.
Sorry, the Cook 90 was the second hard drive on the tape, right?
What's up?
What was the second hard drive on the tape? Wasn't. Just kidding. We're.
Oh, you're still coming? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Where did you mark the second card you had on the critique at responsive to democratic rule formation?
Occurring amidst class stratification.
Why does legal immigration get people out of detention? Or legal representation?
Our current evidence is really good that legal representation is critical for every case because of the complexities of immigration law.
I understand why it might be necessary, but your volley evidence says the standard of proof for immigrant detention is much lower than other forms of detention. If
Right.
that is true,
Why do I keep thinking y'all are the judges? My apologies.
if the standard of proof is lower, what do lawyers do to get immigrants out of detention centers?
The reason why they need lawyers is because the standard of evidence is so low that they cannot represent themselves, and they need legal counsel in order to investigate those complexities. And
Why will they be released as a result of representation?
well, first of all, our argument just rests upon the idea that these people need to have legal representation in order to contest the hegemonic ideology that is that they're just an illegal alien that does not deserve
So your argument is that they can test hegemonic ideologies, but they're still stuck in a detention center.
Well, our argument is that we read good evidence that says that the use of a lawyer allows them to get out of allows innocent people to get out of their detention in the majority of situations where they are gained legal counsel. That's our current evidence.
All right.
Either way, there's only a risk that getting them a lawyer is good. Like
what is an innocent person?
a person who the Attorney General cannot substantiate evidence to justify their continued detention.
Why isn't what sort of evidence? Like what would justify their detention?
I don't know,
Like if they
they've
are
committed-
if they are a
if
threat
they've
of
committed-
terrorism, does that justify
Yes, if they have
detention,
committed
educated
acts
crimes.
that they deem a national security threat.
All right, your evidence says national security threats are the product of a racist and imperialist mindset.
Right.
Why doesn't detaining those individuals also link to your advantage?
It does. That's why we say we should contest that.
You detain people who are determined to be national security threats. Why doesn't that link to your advantage?
Well, we don't
Or do you,
say that
Or
we
do you
should-
allow the detain?
Well, we give representatives to all of them so that they can contest it. If it turns out that they have violated national security, like we can't force the government to give up people who are who have like violated criminal
so it's
or
okay to
war
detain
power
national
authorities.
security
I mean, we obviously don't think that that's good either.
your
But
Henry-
we're not going to defend letting go every single detained person.
Your Hendrick evidence
That's not
says
the
that
point of the
social
affirmative.
spheres are legally defined. What does that mean?
Say what?
Your Hendrick evidence says social spheres are legally defined. What does it mean for them to be
I think
legally
that
defined?
what Hendrik is trying to say is that the law is determined by social forces, and that social forces inform the values and the laws that go into place. And the way to challenge that is to challenge those value systems, to provide legal representation to counter the hegemonic
Right.
ideologies that
If
define
it's true that
what
law
is and what is not a
purely
violation of national
function of
security
social
forces.
forces, why is it necessary to challenge the law to change those social
We
forces?
do both, right? We say that
That,
we
I
as
don't think that
debaters,
answers my question. Why
I
is
think
it
it does.
necessary to challenge the law?
both are necessary to challenge both the social forces that say that illegal aliens are, inferior human beings, and the law's use of detention to strip them of their humanity.
Where's the critique? Or I'm sorry, it's the counterclaim on conditionality, then the critique.
The one card long critique, not the.
Yeah, the one
link
card
critique.
long critique. Okay. There's an overview, it's about 3 sentences long. I don't think you'll need extra paper or anything.
Can I get that?
Is anyone not ready?
Yeah, can you let me pull it up?
Yeah. Awesome. Everyone good?
Counterplan not going for permutation, success, competition, not navigate, they can't generate off in here now. Good, additionality versus good, one negative flexibility, desolate, more ways to do representation, use good affirmatives, we have to be flexible options there, votation because it's impossible for us to predict the reason that goes to AC. Should have to justify their vote against theoretical proposition for compromise, flexibility, less to compromise, classification theory, nickel, last for the F's bad idea, 6 logic, don't reject the counterplan, B, because it's a bad idea. Now, arguments use inevitable, ability, security, security, have to our checks, focus debate down by then, all arguments are conditional, I had straight to the benefits, checks because we would have to go through the corresponding argument, counter interpretations, we can have two conditional options as long as we don't use contrary rules, cross fly offense there, equal conditional, stay in inspect our agent, which is a voting issue now. The critique. The question of this debate is the method we should use to question the power structure. The affirmative says that we should use the same or epistemic location. Unfortunately, they have no defense of the same or what I see, which means the epistemic challenge of the alternative should be sufficient to solve the claim, and the permutation of the alternative solves better than the affirmative. Then you should vote negative on presumption, even if we win. Nothing else in this debate. Now, the first argument they make is to evaluate the perspectives of the other. They can see this is a question of the larger epistemology that exists in the status quo. They necessarily ignore everything that is wrong in the status quo. They say that the war on terrorism writ large is something that's okay, despite the fact that we kill a large amount of people. They question the South Korea and that we don't have to dehumanize North Korea, and the status quo is something that they structurally allow, which is the reason that they are being ignored. They also concede that it is a question of the implementation, which is something that they, since they're always ignoring these structural issues that exist, it is impossible for them to take advantage of, which is the reason that only the alternative can solve. They engage in the larger war on power structuring and advantages that they try to get rid of in the first place. Also, if we win the critique, is able to question all the affirmative is able to solve this impact, which is the reason that you should fall to us. Next argument is the law is key. There is zero risk of solvency deficit. The law can't do anything that's alternate, and simply with justification of the law against suspension in the order of the argument, the disciplinary, and the powers of those who ask to rely on their own judgment. The setting the law of the powers of justice, the life and death of all, that whole meaning strategy in the eighth kids, the 60 exception triggered by the suspension of the law and the extraordinary characters of the terrorism residing in the law and the effect to answer the job, the convention is the terrorists are outside of the law, the human rights law has its own exception, the law can argue the irregular comments, and something the comment in the extending normative of the reality in the place of the current extension is the ongoing transformation of the law, the ongoing transformation into the gauge of the effects of another, which cannot be reduced into the expectation of the content of which is not kidding about the until of the law, the legal not time was the exception is made, the endorsing of the the legal space of the organization has explicitly interaction dependent on the constitution of the organ law, except from the law suspending the time of legal challenges. The law does not disappear, becomes a technique of the government which refers to the particular sovereignty and which it regulates. Now we will reverse see the political GA because they make it worse. That's where goals make up in 11 the Obama speech on national security is a case. And with the symbolic reassurance despite Obama's punishment of 9/11 countries, Moses Bush's Obama's made clear the dramatic change in representing new directions in the last 8 years of the speech. Thus, the powerful person on the Obama administration, and the Americans are all standing lost. And the rhetoric with the policy details include the support of the detention regime. The Obama argued producing that he had a sense of common national security and remarking that he could be participating in the voting of the perspective of the matters. But after the Obama speech, the Cheney offered a vigorous protection of the Bush era counterterrorism policies, where Obama's fair use of the quintessence of the Cheney produced a sense of that seems to be the success of the Obama narrative of the left. The left one of the conservatives were ignoring of the mobilizing justice of the left was abandoning the political square market there. Now they have conceded that representational challenge is sufficient in the one I see which is that we are enough to solve all of their case. Also, even if they can draw the law out of the state, they just draw Wall Smith's underground and make it worse racism as we're looking away. The extraordinary conditions are the quite large epistemology of the liberal use of their most scattered to assume the balance the end of the war on terrorism being curbed basically by exposing contradictions and illegal challenges to the state balance of the successful laws. This is simply travel underground instead. It necessary challenges on the law which are the practices emerging the criticism must interrupt the epistemology of the boroughs. The problem is how to not play by the state of the rules of the state. The goal should not be to take mismanaged photographs of the torture, the produce, the comprehensive discipline of the state violence, which is the effort to erase the different types of satisfaction. The image of the commodification is the simple pain, and the little origin is the source of aesthetic elaboration and the sensation of the new identity singular unrepresented experience of torture for the reason is English actual is polluted by its representation. Now the permutation is the next argument. All of the impact terms above are obviously as this permutation fails, shows evidence keeps the words first. Is legal organization, the conception that we must use the law to solve the issue misplaces our focus and breed and judges governmentality that allows us abuse of the political instruments of the law to continue making it impossible to solve second exceptionality by focusing on how they over the exceptional law we allow the norms of the prisoner's sexual and physical abuse to continue. This is the underlying structure of the great detention policies and the first place. The belief that we have to hire activism to the laws inherently makes it impossible to relate to the affirm and giving grace in the forms of authorization, etc. And evaluating the tools and generating the commitment us, taking the individual features and our lives and mentally and laws of evolution. We effectively exclude bearing all the average law and the commitment cannot as to the sobering the blindness and regarding as our new form of colonialism using the information put within the institution preventing the inequality distribution social life doesn't have and sure they have no arguments playing in the same game the social life doesn't have but unless you are submission and controlling the depletion of power the resources need to be heard with the circumstances of loss of luminous the generation of the problem which there are able to solve the irony of the social life is not free as from the independence but it's the same responsibility in ensuring the independence and the institution regardless of depending the institution and the structure in which they have technology the social activism consists of the constituting of legal mechanism for the existing reform individuals are forced to play particular rules within their market. There also turns their ability to solve war powers. That's actually not that card. And the two externalists versus sidestepping ignores the major who says that legal confrontation can be resolved on the issues. The second one is the legitimization of the war on terrorism. That's where we're looking away. The problem with the legal confrontation is not simply is the sidestepping but the proposing of legitimizing of the war on terror, the geopolitical hegemony of the militarism, the neoliberalism in the United States. It's opposed to serving violence with the secret of the states to remain carefully necessary in the war fighting and the practice precisely because they are the secrets and are built to the strategy and the confrontation and the representation and the acquiring the ground in which the political the war practice is laid out by the state and the strategy against legitimization to the violence of the state apparatus and the torture is only a small part, strengthening the humanitarian liberalism of the imperialism. This is clearly not the characterization of the larger underpinning of the war on terrorism, rather specific tactics through which the project and the attempting and the actualization itself are contradicting to adjustments. So the moral authority of the American exceptionals may be preserved. Obviously, if we win any of our arguments about circumvention, their impact turns to the concept of the permutation and combination is fundamentally impossible. At G, I can I do not believe in compounding things. I believe in clear composition that the most American is what it is. What am I? Is unconditional. The only thing to be honest is to expose yourself to the clear tragedy of who you are. You must be going to risk the position and legal. Make this place is the question of the effective practical solutions of the conscious and Russell and the standard seems susceptible of the exploitation take the form of legal assertion. The legal battle has the common exception of the military one. Legal debate displaces the discussion to be more necessary in the conversation about the Iraq development in the domain of law. The developers of the participation in the end of discussion of the neo-conservative project of the greater Middle East, the difficulty of the regime that had debate not being read by the law of the world, but found other solutions every day. So every discourse renders the critique question impossible in realm of the legal validity of years, restricting the evaporation of the individual responsibility encourages the law to place the responsibility next to it. The experimentation is the non-mutually exclusive parts. That's all of them because we say you can't use the United States federal government. That would make them separate to voting because it makes it impossible for us to generate any offense. It also moots the entire when you see in prison, it's a bad idea, which means that you should always vote negative. Also, the affirmative includes they shouldn't be able to separate any part of their affirmative because we don't know what to do. Permutation presumption always goes negative because they're vague and we have no idea what to do for them. Also, no one puts on multiple words back, which means that this is the only deterrent. Ben, if you have extra stuff, I'm probably gonna have extra time. Last argument is the law is flexible. Just like extra stuff on whatever you're doing. Their next argument is the law is flexible. They make it worse in the flexibility that's morals and Metcalf and actually, I reread that card. They make it worse in the flexibility that was right above on the law debate now. The next I will internal link in this because of the co-opting. The system will change the affirmative before the affirmative is able to change the system. That makes their solvency impossible. It's hard to navigate the power that's to corrupt absolute power corrupts absolutely power seems to corrupt politicians. They seem to root out the corruption when they're actually getting to the position of power. It is a difference where it becomes a higher power to like the rewards of the powerful bureaucracies. It becomes a power to increase the powerful politicians themselves. They do left through the system. The strategy does not work. The institution change. The activists won't the activists change. The change of the institution, even the most revolutionary practices they have learned to gaining power from the enhancing their position of a party or becomes and something parties and every organization is affected by these tendencies. The subjectivity is treating as less worthy and any prospect of the equality and the undermining. No, even if they win their arguments that they are able to change the law, I think it misses our larger argument, which is that your structures would just be recreated at the bottom. That means they cancel more powers that Mervios and Metcalf in loving primarily response to the series of the temporary diversions from the world don't ignore the more pressing tendency to dehumanize the areas where you're calling a heyday of the Ku Klux Klan in the early 1920s. This is entirely unnatural by the domination of the post-9/11 narrative and the negation of redemption because they are studying the elephant from the wrong end of the telescope. We came to a flawed understanding. Interventions came to and incomplete understanding of exclusively on the belief that the security of legal rights and these structures of the policies we get adapting and changing a little bit more or less law automatically reflect the acceptance of the speaking of the underlying social or political dynamic. A victory or whistle window war guarantee the prisoners at Guantanamo a right to enjoy real habeas corpus victories in Brownlee Board guarantee the South would be the segregated. Ben, do you have anything you want to read? I got 40 seconds.
Where are those cards?
Those cards are all in the speech doc that I've read so far. Just a sort of mention. Yeah, can you go to the solvency flow? The restriction is a smoker will not be enforced that's indivisible. If 7, there is no causal evidence this is part of the construction of the logic. The Congress will use the smoke screen of the resolution to create the illusion of the congressional participation. They do not ensure the publication. They must be the important no matter how much the legislation the Congress passes. It will not go to anything that is not. If Congress lacks the institutional incentive to check the president, the observers highlight the electoral disincentive the Congress faces in constraining the president. Another point to the collective action comes the efforts are obscured and the re-election is focused on the resources in the digital level and constrained today. Media voters likely to defer. That card will be in the one in my speech doc.
Where's the last card you read on the K?
The last card I read in the K is on the criminal.
What's it called?
It's Margulis and Metcalf. It was tagged as that turns the ability to solve.
That was the card you said you read twice. Did you read it?
No. Okay, there are 2 different Margulis and Metcalf cards. The one that's like the reverse see the political DA, I accidentally put in the speech doc twice.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, what should we do as debaters in this round to like alleviate indefinitely detained immigrants?
Well, we should change the representational practice we have toward that. And say
What is a good
that.
representational practice to challenge indefinite detained immigrants?
I mean, we've agreed that it's wrong because the way that the state functions to militarize other
That's my question. So what's a good,
thing.
productive form of representational politics?
One of saying that what the state has done is bad. It's a question of epistemology.
That's
not
all we have.
The Gorlick evidence is like it's a
So
question of
any
epistemology
engagement in the law is a bad epistemology.
Yeah.
But we still have to say that what the law is doing is bad.
Yes.
If we say what the law is doing is bad, but we say engaging in the law is a bad form of politics, then how can we challenge?
I think that there are
any of those forms
two
of
separate
epistemology?
arguments. The first one is you said a particular legal tactic is bad, not the law written.
What makes you think?
The Gorlick evidence is absurdly good.
What makes you think that your epistemology can change what the USFG thinks about indefinitely detained immigrants?
Right. Your advantage is like the way
I'm
we see
asking
others
you
is
this
constructed as a form
I'm
of
asking
whiteness.
you this
I think it
question
solves
here.
every terminal impact you've read.
You're not
Fine.
answering my
People
question.
will eventually win elections. There are other people that will be in
Answer
government.
my
who will get
question.
votes. I just
How
answered your question.
does changing your epistemology change the status of indefinitely detained immigrants?
Okay, I think your assumption is we don't get fiat of the alternative.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm
Okay,
asking
then
you
we
to
change.
describe
The
the world.
epistemology is changed behind the thing.
Fine.
The way we see the other is fundamentally different because we see the war
What
on
state of
terrorism,
exception is
war on policy.
created by giving lawyers to people who are not represented?
The state of exception that is the following. Indefinite detention is the only bad thing that we're doing. The militarism
Are
in
they
South
not-
Korea,
are
I
they-
have no
are
idea
they-
what's wrong with that. That's a quote from 1AC Cross-X. A quote from 2AC Cross-X is when Ben asks you, how do you resolve the larger issue? And you're like, we just give them lawyers. We think that's important. But the larger war on terrorism that
What
exists where
do
we
you
say
do
we
about the
kill people
larger
is
war on
bad.
terrorism?
We critique the epistemology.
You
Our
critique
argument
the
is the
epistemology of
fundamental
law. How do
understanding
you
of
critique
things.
the epistemology of the war on terror in places like South Korea?
We say it's bad.
Okay. So
I don't get what your
nice.
question is.
Way to go.
We say the epistemic underpinning of it is one based in militarism and otherization.
That
which is
sounds
something that should
exactly
always be
like the
rejected.
1AC. That's fine.
But the 1AC places the reliance on a tactical shift, not an
Right,
underlying
and the
epistemic
alternative
shift.
does, right, and the alternative does nothing. We get
No,
it.
it places an epistemic shift, which is key.
What's the impact? Who is the your Hirschrock evidence indicates that social activists become apathetic.
Yeah.
Who
Debaters.
what?
Or social activists.
So like we as debaters become
Apathetic.
Our argument is that
What is the solution to apathy?
not using the law. That's
Not
what
doing
makes us apathetic.
Not using the law. So changing
What makes
the way
us
we think
apathetic
about
is we say, we have this great idea, but it can only work if we structure it around the law and we can force the law to be what we want it to be. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen because you change tactics without changing underlying things.
What are good
That's
tactics?
why things like
What are good
immigration.
tactics then?
That's the
What's
wrong
of knowledge?
question. The question is not what are good tactics.
So
It's what are good
knowledge-
underlying epistemic policies.
We got it. No knowledge production is good knowledge production.
Well, no.
Well, I'm emailing it now. The order is the detainees, word criticism, the top calorie argument, then the salt. Politics. Oh, sorry, politics before all of that.
Sorry.
Okay,
So
so
it's politics, the detention word pick, topicality, and then there's something like solvency on the bottom.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I sent it out. Ah. Everyone good?
Right. Taking the politics is that concede fiat solves politics are irrelevant means the plan doesn't affect the political process and we should ignore it if it we should ignore it if it does also concede the impact defense. None of these arguments are reasons to vote affirmative conditionality proves that. Now the pick.
It is, yeah.
They've conceded that the 1AC uses violent euphemistic language that effaces the suffering of prisoners as Guantanamo and immigration camps. Prisoners are being deprived and tortured. They are not simply detained. In the context of the they've read evidence that prisoners are the subject of racist, psychological violence. Detainee implies that immigrants are simply detained but ignores the endless course of violence perpetrated on immigrants. You should endorse the language of prisoner instead because only that demonstrates the actual political role that prisoners play in the context of both the current war on terror and racist anti-immigration policy. That's a reason to vote negative. Language matters and has material political effects. Euphemism insulates listeners from experiencing the meaning of the 1AC and detaches us from the immigrant suffering. That's the second 1AC card. We have met the burden of joining both sides. The debate about policy alone is insufficient. The 1AC is a paper. We gave it a failing grade. We shouldn't have to rewrite another paper to negate the 1AC. Now, the first argument is that we did, but the 1AC legal evidence says detention subjugates detainees to unlivable conditions resulting in self-deportation. They read the policing card, but they did not get to the relevant part of this card, which is why I'm extending this without reading a new piece of evidence. You should require evidence because of the complicated political issue, and there's no explanation of this argument. Otherwise, we should not allow the 1AR to develop this argument because that encourages sandbagging. Their evidence, the part of the card they read just as democratic politics is inherently tied up with policing, which, if anything, proves that politics through the state is not useful. Now, topicality, we're not going for this argument, but they've conceded a solemnity argument that Obama can rely on immigration powers in a world of the plan. The plan simply provides legal counsel, but does not allow prisoners to actually be released. Which our evidence says Obama has historically relied on immigration authority to prevent prisoners from being released into the United States, and immigration is fallback law that will keep them in prison, turn in as 11 immigration law doctrine, fallback performance have set of legal tools to exclude for national fallback quality of immigration law. Now sent out every team to one of the majority of petitions for legal reasons, but we need the detention for exclusion non-citizen primarily just by plenary power doctrines, while constitutional arguments favor relief proven in effect of plenary powers doctrine. Leaders detained for 9 years by framing legal powers of immigration law, including state issues, leaders' detention is legal reason not required by law. Now, the case page. I'm going to concede a couple of critical arguments. That should make it very, very difficult for them to be the critique. First, they made the argument that consequence is not important because it's a question of methodology and who's included in impact calculus, which proves only the truancy's interrogation of epistemology is necessary to affect politics. And actually, that's the only argument I'm conceding. Now, the solemnity debate. The president will circumvent congressional restrictions on his war power authority. None of their evidence assumes the way the current political climate now operates in the context of wartime authority in the country. None of their evidence assumes the way the current political climate now operates in the context of war power authority, which gives the president massive deference and means legal restrictions are not effective because they do not create political pressure, because he can always circumvent them by appealing to security processes. That's our low bell evidence. Their only warrant is that the president will their only warrant is congressional funding allocation. First, the president will reallocate funds trading improves Congress's appropriation power now be effective for the limit of war despite Congress past ever trading and secure financing Congress for years. Congress only united appropriation for operations funding to ensure the president was not securing funding Congress for any given time. President's ability to previously appropriate funds can always allocate money. Second, the plan text doesn't say this because it just says restrict authority. Does not say restrict funding. You should not reward them for vagueness because that makes it impossible to develop a negative strategy. Because that makes it impossible to develop a negative strategy. And the restriction is a smokescreen and will not be enforced. L7. There's not evidence. Oh, sorry. I'm finishing it. Core chaos and training initiatives might be negative. Culture based commercial rates will be upon death years. Non-complaints like the president's obligated to follow the best interpretation of statutory requirements, which means the president can just reinterpret the plan and de facto ban legal counsel. Article 11, the president claims priority court laws, which he disagrees. One version involves the president's authority to interpret the law of court. Interpretation not the original obligation to interpret the Constitution because many executive branch may include judicial use of obligation to interpret the constitutional statutory requirements to become a conflict. In each case, the president was taking care of faithfully execute the law. The president publicly justified his decision. Now, the F doesn't have an internal view. Any of their terminal impacts. Cross-sex was devastating here. The F allows the detention of immigrants who are thought to be national security threat. Their birth evidence, as well as I forgot the slide with the card about how the U.S. Foreign policy operates under framework of white supremacy. Both say that the framing of national security threat in the first place is something that is necessary to be challenged to solve the affirmative. This isn't just a defensive argument. It proves our link argument is valid critique because their use of the law as something that they think actually helps people is just a palliative. And Congress will continue to represent war efforts President Israel's crisis escalation agenda. 6. Once the president escalated crisis, mobilizing the government to strong tendency that Congress will false electoral factors influence Congress. The president's ability to shape public opinion, make it likely Congress will represent the president's use of force initiatives. Robert Sanders obviously internally turns to offense because it proves that even if Congress restricts in the short term, it will not restrict future presidential discretion. And Congress will stand down. They don't care about institutional power. They don't care about institutional power, which means Obama will win the game about interpreting the plan text every time when each member says something in Congress institution appropriate lynch blow about regularly trade up into Congress for personal lynch law years ago. Instead of all President Bill 1990, President James 2000, next week the world's only 37 job 3 times total legislature members find it could be acquiesced over because they obstruct the military operation. The president will control the public interpretation. She has a decisive communication advantage over the other branches. Article 11, President is taught SBR is keeping generating laws that executing policy. President Chief Economist specific national policy results from over the conceptions of constitutional meetings give a reward for the presidency's ability to use the office's voice to persuade others to the community way to first office holders marshalling party passions the president's ability to communicate through community was utility to modern media when people see government action that is most direct recipient of the public's attention and Congress's chair president wouldn't care so well. The Constitution defines the issue of military forces one that to the president always first military begins no constant media controls forces station Congress always calculate to the president police the force countries Congress but to receive themselves to check out Congress to parties for the president always counsel so for the president need not fear an institutional reaction and rally around the flag effect will overcome Republican opposition. Section 5 brought opposition like the first we revenge rallying around the flag victors all executive unilateral within a separation of powers system.
We had 6:15.
plaintiffs interpret this as a restriction that provides legal counsel for everyone that is that for immigrants that are detained, the power of the person is sufficiently also able to solve lesser topicality cars. Obviously, they executive cannot reallocate the power of the person because it doesn't have control over budgetary decisions, which means Congress is able to sufficiently limit their ability to provide court cases without legal counsel for immigrants. Their 212 circumvention evidence is not specific enough, especially because none of their evidence assumes legal counsel. Additionally, our plan would allow each individual to individually challenge the detention policy, which none of their evidence takes into account, which means we can win on a case-by-case basis, which means we would also be able to sufficiently mathematics that are impact immigrant detention, creates a form of racialized exclusion that ultimately culminates in violence and becomes the primer for warfare through things like Orientalism and whiteness, etc. Durable. Fiat also solves for all the reasons why Congress would not be able to check because the plan requires this legal counsel to happen in the first place. Now topicality, legal counsel means that they would be able to get released because they would win these court cases in the first place, which means Obama cannot cite that immigration authority, which means that is a sufficient check. Go to the LLC counterplan. Examine that conditionality is a voter saying that conditionality is the reason to reject the argument. Off the team is the same logic of conditionality that we are indicting center counter-interpretation that they are able to get one conditional option that's sufficient to be able to solve for the negative flexibility in all of their offense because they can still have very strategies. However, they're uniquely abusive because they don't meet their counter-interpretation for two reasons. One is that they have three conditional advocacies and their counter-interpretation only has two. Additionally, they do contradict in the first place because they read the OLC counterplan to endorse law while criticizing law in the first place, which is that they would cause us to read strategies against ourselves, which destroys any form of effective affirmative offense. Additionally, it destroys our strategies because it means that they can kick out of everything, which is also not reciprocal to you. And never will argue it's not true under our interpretation. Go to the detention pit. Except the permutation, but the permutation would be able to solve for the violent language argument because the definite detention is we say indefinite detention, not just detention, which means which they don't have an indefinite detention assumes all of the horrible things that they outline. Additionally, we read a 1AC impact outlining the horrors of detention policy in the status quo, which means if this is a discursive link, you should look at the evidence we actually read in this debate. We also use the language of detention against the system anyways to challenge existing conception in the first place, which their evidence does not assume. Additionally, the permutation will offer a juxtaposition of these terms in the first place in a world where you just vote on the alternative. No one would actually know that there was anything messed up in the first place. Additionally, they endorse the same logic of policing. That's our chambers evidence that they indict on the critique. I'll finish the card here. Consensus democracy is not political model of policing. Consensus democracy found a model very elimination of politics on the calling of the conflict. Consensus Russia that are central democratic politics. Consensus democracy implements a new police order. The politics of police helps us to grasp the inadequacy of the utopian model of pure politics obviously applies to the other K. Go there now. The framework of this debate is who best can contest the hegemonic ideologies of indefinite detention through taking the perspective of the detained immigrant. And obviously, detained immigrants would want a form of legal counsel, which and by just fighting against it, other people fighting against the system will actually do anything. All their impacts are non-unique anyways because the state of exception already exists for the immigrant because it's an invisible form of violence, which is the reason why we have to challenge institutions in the first place. That's the only place. It's the place for violence in the first place. A couple framing issues. One is that all their link evidence assumes status quo while not pluralism. We think that every form of law ideology should be included in the first place, which they don't assume. Second is that we challenge the underlying assumptions that allow for the underpinning of law in the first place. They say that we never contest the war on terror. However, our 1AC, a bunch of pieces of 1AC evidence indicate that the immigration policy is what influenced the law regarding the war on terror in the first place, which means if we question the philosophical underpinnings of immigration, we're sufficiently able to question all the root cause claims they make coming out of the 2AC. Their South Korea argument is silly pluralism would allow for contesting these forms of hegemonic ideologies in the first place. They read this error now evidence. However, our use of legal counsel allows us to challenge the state of exception and abusive law in the status quo because everybody would be able to get a voice. The planet would be equally represented. The next piece of evidence is just about an Obama speech and its symbolic use. However, this does not assume the specific solvency mechanism of providing legal counsel that we outline. There's also no link to their lawlessness in the case because we do challenge the existing systems of thought through of things like racialized warfare and Orientalism. That's our Smith evidence. Set the permutation both. You can obviously combine providing legal counsel while challenging law as a whole. We suffer their exceptionality argument because it's rooted in because they say that it's rooted in alienation of a specific population, which is grounded in immigration policy in the first place. Our Smith evidence does not sidestep anything because it indicates that we have to focus on intersections that cause this form of exclusion in the first place, which solves the links to their evidence. Additionally, questioning immigration, questioning the war on terror as a whole, which I concede to impact evidence. I'll respond to above evidence to reason reject the argument, not the team. Additionally, you can challenge the law itself while saying everyone getting a voice is a good idea, which means the combination argument is not impossible. Their evidence is terrible. Anyways, additionally, their co-option argument just says that power corrupts politics. However, we're the only check on those politicians because pluralism allows us to make one specific form of power not desirable. There's also no solvency for the alternative. One just doesn't change the United States federal government perceptions of immigrants, which means the United States federal government would act in the same way regardless. The second is that it's not a floating pig because that would be a vote because it steals all 1AC offense, which means that the alternative would leave people detained in the first place, which means that they have no effective way to actually challenge us for people in the status quo who are detained. Third is the epistemic shift doesn't actually solve anything. Other fighting against the federal government won't change their form of epistemology.
hegemonic structures, but it is not through indefinite detention or immigration. These are qualifiers that we put on things to say that we don't have to question the broader structures of hegemonic discourse that exists in the UNHCR. John's evidence is fabulous on this. It indicates that this is how we make it an exceptional position that is different than the prisons because it is uniquely justified. These are uniquely people who need help, as opposed to everyone else who is detained in the status quo, everyone else who is imprisoned in the status quo, everyone else who we are militarizing in the status quo. They have ignored all of these issues. There is no explanation of why we have troops overseas right now. No explanation of why we can kill and rape individuals in the status quo or allow structural violence to continue without looking at the alternative. That means the epistemic location of the alternative, of the affirmative, and the method that the 1AC has used is fundamentally flawed. I don't have to win a uniqueness argument or an alternative argument because they conceded the framework analysis that Ben did in the 1NR, which indicates that if we prove the paper that the 1AC has written is messed up, then you vote for us inevitably because that is what an educator does. We obviously don't have to write them a better paper, uniquely true, because all we have to do is prove that the affirmative is a bad idea. Now, their first argument is that the impact is not unique. Obviously, our alternative is able to overcome this, and it doesn't justify using a further messed up system. They have basically said the war on terrorism is going on right now, so we should continue the logic of the war on terrorism. I think they missed the boat on a larger critique. It's that you can't keep saying that one thing is wrong and a tactic is wrong, but you have to say the underlying epistemic location of the strategy is wrong. The triad calculus they're going to get out of this is obviously the way we conceive politics in order to kill the other in the status quo, because it is literally try or die to kill the immigrant because they are dirty and we have to get rid of them. Their next argument is that our links assume the status quo. I call BS. Our Gorlick evidence and our John's evidence are the best cards I have cut this year, and I spent about 3 weeks reading these cards over and over to John Turner, who even said that they were pretty okay, which should be enough justification for these evidence being on fire. It indicates that you allow us to look at other things and say that we've changed one tactic, but we don't have to change the broader structure, and the broader structure that exists is okay. We are internal link turning the pluralism argument. Obviously, it is not the structure they use. They say we question one thing, and then all other power structure go away. Poof, oopsies, that's not how it works, because whiteness exists because there is a black-white dichotomy, and we hate other people. It's not because we don't give the immigrants in the status quo the ability to get a lawyer, and that is ridiculous. If you're going to vote on that, you have to explain to me how the hell giving them a lawyer gets rid of everything that is wrong on the status quo. It answers the we question the war on terrorism argument next. Now, the legal challenges are wholly insufficient. Guantanamo Bay is not a place that lacks enough laws to law. It's a place that has too goddamn many laws. That's why we can use immigration as a fallback, where Obama can redefine what words are, because there is so much legal conjunction going on there that no one knows what the hell is actually happening. The international laws have necessarily been redefined, and we always just call people who are being detained persons of something else because we don't want to define who they are in order to get out of it. Now, obviously, they don't have specific solvency, and the fact that they try to draw to it is the link in the first place. Their next argument is, the reversing the political argument was extending here, it should be extended here. When they think that they have finished something, they allow the issue to continue, which makes it worse. Now, they actually are intelligent, which was answered by the permutation that has all of the residual links that I just explained. The Herschel evidence is on fire, indicates that other people would be tied to our movement, and we would think it is necessarily tied to the state action, which is something that makes the movement necessarily fall in on itself. The reversing the political DA is an impact to this because it indicates that thinking that we can structure it within the state means that we stop thinking that we have to do things by ourselves, and it means we can't get anything. And they also, we don't have to win the permutation because you kick the alternative, and our criticism is a way of proving they're wrong. They say CIR is first. That's the link. That means they don't focus on anything else because they ignore what is happening in the status quo. Now, the plan is obviously just another way of allowing people to question us, which is what is wrong in the status quo, when they don't question the war on terrorism, which is answered they aren't able to check because they just give it to the other. They would say that you can get a person to help you with the law, and then everything will be all better magically, and we'll never do anything wrong again. Unfortunately, in O.J. Simpson's case, I'm not sure that's how it worked out, or in anything else. So changing Broadview Board of Education does not desegregate the South and make all the white slave owners say, oh, we love all the black people now, because that's not how history works. And they have functionally messed this up. Our epistemology does change everything because it changes the starting point. We're obviously not a floating pig because we have set through the 1 and C. We advocate all parts of the affirmative except for the use of the state, and we focus on the specific. It is able to spell over because we've said the larger structure they have is wrong, which is the reason that you should default to us in negation theory, and to like to prove their bad idea conditionality debate. This is probably their only way out, and it's pretty shakily extended. They concede negation theory, which means all I have to do is prove the affirmative is a bad idea, which I think that I have done to a pretty bad letter. The counterinterpretation may solve their offense, it isn't able to solve our benefit because we aren't able to prove the affirmative is bad in all of the angles. They don't solve negative flexibility because we aren't able to skew them from both sides and test them from all angles. They conceded A-spec is a voting issue because it skews the strategy and new affirmative for something that are inherently unpredictable, which is a reason to reject the team or at least allow conditional options in this world. We only had 2 conditional options. The word K was you shouldn't abuse that word. No alternative, which is not a conditional option. You can contradict yourself with one conditional rule, not mentioning the fact that we didn't in this round, or else just concede something. There is no strategy skew because of ability to speak, research, all inevitable. Also, the impact is so minuscule you shouldn't allow it. Now, the disadvantage, we are obviously no alternative, which means that we don't need to win the permutation. They have conceded as a link because they think that detention is a place where it is a little bit different than the prison. This system is functionally different, but that is the link to the critique because we fundamentally don't realize that these things are all the same. The language and the way they've displayed this proves that they are mutually exclusive, and it also proves a large link to our criticism by focusing on indefinite detention and not the policies that we have at large. The juxtaposition part makes no sense, and it also would necessarily be bad because it includes the parts that say that you do it for your justification. Also, we don't need to win an alternative. The last argument they read says the law is bad and we can't have liberal democratic norms policing us and telling us what to do. That's the K. Solved. Zero risk of solvency, and I won't get here very long. They've conceded that Obama can circumvent with a number of powers. Subpoint A, he redefines what words in the resolution. Subpoint B is Obama will be able to say that we're in wartime, so we have to detain more people. Subpoint C is he will be able to change the immigration authority that exists. And subpoint D is he could redirect the funding from other things. They can't be out of this because Obama can cut one of his own programs in order to start another one. Even if they win this, they conceded a larger solvency claim, which is you get rid of indefinite detention of people who we think are evil, but we still call them evil. That is exactly what's wrong with the status quo. Kick the alt and vote for us on presumption if you want to.
Go straight down the illegal alien page, which is functional, his overview. Then answer the circumvention stuff. Then I'll get to the law K proper, which starts with the Gorlick analysis. And then I'll get to the deterrence thing. The circumvention solvency stuff's at the bottom of the first page. take the perspective that the detained immigrant in this debate because that's the only thing that matters. The entire impact calculus of the negative is a self-oriented form of politics that renders the only thing that matters is the way we question our forms of systematical thought. The affirmative is obviously going to win that we challenge that form of ideology, but the purpose and the impact and the thing that matters about that impact is not ourselves and our forms of apathy or our form of self-activism, which is what all of the Gorlick and Hirschberg evidence is talking about, but whether or not our forms of counter-hegemonic ideologies can contest the detainment of the indefinite detainee. There is literally zero contextualization of the 2NR of how his argument can eventually result in some form of indefinite detention, which means there is a massive, not just time frame dissent, but a massive epistemological dissent to the way that the 2NR is constructed. It relies on a fallacy that says that because we can't solve every form of oppression within the war on terrorism, that we should remove, and we cannot remove the entirety of the war on terrorism, we should be okay with the status quo indefinite detainee of immigrants, which turns the entirety of the focus point of the 2NR. The Robson method first arguments and the educator reasons are reasons why you should evaluate the entirety of the one you see as a product, not as a particular focus point, not as a thesis, which means that his idea that you can just expert parts of the affirmative is a form of grading system, a form of policing that our Chambers evidence says that you must reject, which is also an impact on his logic, which also proves that the only point of the 2NR is to focus on a form of self-centered form of exceptionalism, which will also reproduce the state of exception, because this debate round becomes a situation point for them to learn of their forms of which they themselves are guilty of participating in the very same system that they criticize. If the method comes first, then you should not evaluate the YC plan text, but you should evaluate the entirety of the YC, which also includes our criticism of the way in which the current immigrant detention system frames the illegal alien as both a criminal and a terrorist. And this logic is bad, and the only way to contest this is a form of radical pluralism that legitimates the perspective of the non-citizen who is excluded from this perspective because they do not meet the definition of a system. They are not present in this debate space, they are not present in the 2NR, and they are not present in the American polity, which means only the affirmative invigorates that form of politics. Our Chambers evidence talks about the distinction between dissensus and politics. Dissensus is a form of interrogating the current dominant epistemology, which is exactly what the Hirschberg and Gorlick say is important. The 2NR, however, is a form of policing, is saying that any engagement in the war on terror means that we cannot activate politics. Any form of using the word detention is a form of negative politics that can never be a result of empowerment, but this excludes the way in which our method particularly is empowering for immigrant detention, which means that is the only, functionally the only thing we have to win is that our particular method is good. He says that in negation theory, but I've been picturing that about the 1AC does not continue the war on terror. The entire 1AC is a criticism of the way in which the immigration detention policies informed the detention policy of the war on terror and contribute to those forms of oppression that contribute to mass incarceration of prisons, the detainment of Muslims and Islamic people at places like Bagram and places like Guantanamo Bay. Obviously, we cannot remove all of them from indefinite detention. Obviously, we cannot resolve the war on terror, but that's not a reason why we should throw the baby out the bathwater. The circumvention arguments literally make no sense. The President Obama cannot redefine congressional legislation that says that legally funded council organizations cannot serve immigrants. The plan prevents the executive from denying that restriction by removing the congressional restrictions that exist against representing immigrants, which means you can't redirect funding because it's a congressional program, not a executive. Also means you can't. This still called evil argument also doesn't make sense. We say the war on terror is evil, and we say that one way that we as individuals can contest that, or they can contest those sorts of inequalities is by advocating for the legal representation of immigrants. Now, the 2NR says that we can do everything but the state. This is first a floating pick was supposed to be rejected because it makes the 2AR literally impossible, especially when they read a floating pick argument, but it also means that they cannot solve our pluralism advantage, which is the defense of our methodology, which means you can't impact on something when they have literally zero evidence on the question of indefinite detention or pluralism proper, which means you should default to the specificity of our evidence because he has given us a way out in this debate by saying that they do everything but engaging in the state. If you can't engage in the state, you can't engage in dissensus forms of politics, which are necessary to counter hegemonic politics in the context of the immigration. That is our Hernandez evidence and our Goloshki evidence. Now, okay. Actually, detention first. Look, we use detention as a form of empowerment. It's not a reappropriation, but it is a criticism of using the master tools against himself. Detention is tied to the larger system of incarceration. That's the entire analysis I did about our entirety of our 1AC evidence is talking about the way in which detention is a metaphor for the same things that they do. But our metaphor argument relies on masking the way in which detention is a bad form. The 1AC is a recognition, the exact definition of a recognition of the way in which detention is a messed up policy. We say that the way to contest that is through the 1AC, which means there's no version of this is also a form of policing, where we say that your language is you can be used against you because you didn't meet our definition of prisoner, or you didn't use our definition of detainee, which is obviously our argument that we should not use these kinds of precise language, because that's the exact language that's used to codify the immigrant, the illegal alien, as not worthy of citizenship rights, and only deemed inferior individual who can be deported and detained. Now, the K. Radical democracy is good. It's necessary to counter hegemonic assumptions. From the perspective of the immigration is key because it is a very particular intersectionality between securitization and the war on terror within a system of oppression that exists in a gendered and a form of gendered and removal program that exists within the process of deportation. Our affirmative is a lens for contesting all forms of oppression. That is our Hernandez definition. Is really getting the question of this also solves all of this war on terror because it means that we provide a lens by which we can challenge other forms of oppression. The Hirschrock evidence specifically says that we need to challenge the locus of interdependence, which is the definition of intersectionality. Is Gorlick evidence says that we need to challenge and interrupt systems of thought and epistemology. That's the exact language that our Glover and our Hankweiser evidence used in the context of radical pluralism. He says that we don't question the war on terrorism. That's obviously a lie. He says that you say all presumption arguments go affirmative. All we have to win is that our methodology is good, because he said that our role is as educators. You have to win that detaining immigrants is bad or good in order to vote.
Okay. Anything you described as being on fire, I need. And then if I could get the Hernandez and the Gulch. Hernandez and Gulch.
I can't pronounce it. So.
What?
I can't pronounce it either.
Okay. If I could borrow a computer or have it emailed, because I'm running on the Chrome OS, so I don't have Word.
Use mine.
I can just bring my computer.
Okay.
You can also use mine if you need. Streaming pretty much over.
You don't want the other pluralism cards. So there's actually two cases of Hernandez evidence.
don't believe the affirmative solves all of the case. And when it comes down to the agreed framework of who better questions hegemonic powers, I feel that the critique in the negative solves that better. I don't know if Gorlak's actually on fire, but he's very clear in saying that just describing violence is not enough to actually change it. And so that knocks out the only answers that really mattered on the detainees critique. Your entire rebuttal was that you're showing the problem with detention, and then the Gorlak evidence says that showing the problem is the problem. The other thing is when we're talking about the state of exception, you can't work from within the state. That's just not how biopolitics in a Compton works, especially a Compton. You can get away with it somewhere. But yeah, once you start talking about the state of exception, you can't actually be going through the political sphere. So that is kind of where I defaulted. For the critique, for the affirmative, I really like the case. I think you guys could be doing a lot more with it, including adding an in-round contention. Because you could definitely be doing some stuff on rhetoric, and that means when you have a K team that's going up against you, you don't have to resort to framework and terms. You can say why your critique is better and weigh the in-round benefits as well as the outer-ground benefits, which means you get the best of both a political world and a clinical world. That said, even without that aspect, everyone needs to be very much aware of the rhetoric that they are using, especially in this round. There were several instances of these people and they and otherization during the round. It's going to become an issue. But when you're talking about preventing otherization and trying to solve for that, you shouldn't be otherizing them while you do that. Right, and so with the solvency, because you're only giving them the option of legal advice, you can't solve, because that doesn't mean that they will no longer be detained. You need to find something that allows them to determine, see, the biggest issue is that how do you determine who's guilty and who's innocent while still saying no one should be detained, but terrorists should be detained. And so it gets really messy, and I'm not really sure how to best resolve that.
I think our argument is that the whole theory of rhetoric democracy is just that we need to create spaces in which we can test those hegemony, which means I don't even understand what the result of whether or not they choose to take the advice or whether or not they actually win the cases in the end.
Okay, if you focus on the space, that's good. The problem is the real world impacts you don't get automatically because that internal link isn't there. If there's the space or the potential for something, that doesn't automatically assume, like if you have A, you can't assume C. There has to be B in between that's connecting the space to actually solving these impacts. So I was looking for an example. So, right, you're talking about violence, racism, colonialism, oppression, and so getting rid of, creating a space for those to potentially be solved doesn't mean they're actually solved.
I mean, the impact cards are not talking about like we need to remove all forms of racism. Something like they're talking about the ideology of those things and how we need to contest those. That contestation is what's important to challenge those systems, right?
Add many. You need to include many in your
moral
1AC.
obligation argument?
Yeah, well, like, there's a portion of the card that says, even if we can't actually solve all of these issues, trying is better than not. And that allows an actual card in there that says, that way it makes it clear, because when you're trying to do something, that doesn't mean it's done. And so I think bringing up the analytics of, well, there's other forms, like we have troops in Korea, we have troops overseas, there's other forms of structural violence going on. How does this one instance fix all of this?
Why does that prove that the app is bad?
I'm not, the app isn't bad, the app doesn't solve. Like, you're not getting that connection. And so at the end of the day, I made my decision because I feel working outside of the state is going to be more effective in challenging hegemonic powers, which is what the agreed framework was coming out of the 1AR.
You think that it's better for the immigrant that we work outside the system?
I think that by actually challenging these ideas in round is what's most effective, right?
How do we not challenge those ideas? Is I guess what I'm saying.
Right, like you're not saying, okay, this one person is going to be helped. This one person is no longer going to be detained because they had access to counsel.
Right.
And the problem is that you can't even prove that one person could have that option.
I still don't understand why that's at all relevant. I don't think. Do you think that we constructed this round to be that way, very linear, very? We need to be able to actually solve these instances. We need to actually get people out of detention.
Unfortunately, yes. I can see that you're trying to be less political, but at the same time, you're not fully critiquing. And so I think separating them out, where trying is important and we should be doing that, but also just discussing it should be important. And so right now it's somewhere in between, and I don't think you're getting either of them.
So you think there's a better, because I guess the idea is that the first advantage is what exactly you just said. And then the second advantage, pluralism, is the reason why talking about it and trying to inform them in these ways is good. How can we make that distinction more clear and slash more, I guess, stringent?
Well, especially like the pluralism kind of folded in on itself and became 1 or 2 points after the 2AC.
Okay.
And so I think expanding that better, 15 to 20 seconds at the top of the 1AR is always going to make it a lot easier for the 2AR to talk about it. Because, and like, looking over the 1AC has this stuff in it about, escalation and oppression and what happens if they're not challenged, but they're not extended throughout the round. And so just go home tonight, write a couple overviews, and even, just a note on the side of your paper, and just having them in the rebuttals is going to make it really easy to change that. Any other questions?
I just have one. This reverse the political dissent that we're trying to go for, which is when you think you've solved, you just make it worse because we stop trying to solve anymore. Does that articulation how do you think that could be better articulated?
I don't know. I get it. It makes sense. I don't think it had enough weight in this round. In general, yes, if you're trying to solve one thing, everything else won't get solved, and especially with the United States. If we fix one thing, all the other problems go away. And so, I'm not sure. One option would be making it a full argument. Blow it up.
Okay.
Add more cards. Doesn't hurt. But yeah, in this round, it made sense, but was not something I had to evaluate.
Yeah, that's fair. Sorry, my last question was about this framework argument that Ben takes in the webinar. What do you think the best framework interpretation would be for this type of critique, where we want to say we should prove the way you've done it is wrong, not necessarily there's a right way to do it?
In-round education is the way to go. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this wasn't a problem because both teams pretty much agreed and felt they were addressing it in different ways. But yeah, because finding, there's several authors out there, and I'll look them up and get back to you guys for tomorrow, that's saying like, by focusing on trying to find a solution, we're only focusing on singular things, and that means we can't be focusing on the broader aspects. And so by trying to solve instead of trying to critique, you end up making it impossible to solve.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for
Thanks, guys.
I just powered all that up at the same time.
Were you putting the debates you're streaming into a YouTube channel?
What's up?
Are you putting the debates you're streaming into a YouTube channel?
I'm putting on. Wait, have you heard of Twitch.tv?
Yeah. Oh,
It's
on like a stream.
It's on Justin.tv, and then
Oh,
if you
yeah.
go to, I can send you the link if you want. It's you go to like /GT debate streams,
Yeah,
or I'm
yeah,
sure if you
from-
like search it on Google, it's probably gonna
I'm
be.
gonna find it from Ricardo's.
Yeah.